The topic of minority or minority thoughts is an interesting one to me. I'd have to say in my own personal experience, I haven't, every time I've been a minority, it's actually been a relatively good thing. My most clear example right now, I live in China. I'm a minority group of white men. And what I've found in China is that actually, as this minority, Chinese people actually seem to treat me better than they treat Chinese people. Also in my work, I help students get into competitive colleges, and actually any minority quality you have is usually a plus. It helps you get into competitive colleges. So from that perspective, as opposed to talking about the majority, mistreating the minority because of religion or ethnic background or that type of thing, I'm going to talk more about minority as a positive thing. To do that, I'm going to use my own experience, art project I started last year, which I think I drew some useful lessons to, and hopefully it can apply to everybody. And I can talk a little bit about how to use the creative arts to make yourself your own unique qualities, your minority qualities, if you will, how to enhance them and how to understand your own unique qualities better. So this is called the minority narrative. And so narrative is a talk, a story. So towards the end of the talk, I'll talk a little bit about everyone has their own narrative. In other words, we all have our own story. Last year, I started a project called the 30-Year Scrolls. And the idea was pretty simple. I first started with one, but the idea was I was going to paint a scroll for 30 years, just keep painting, one continuous painting. And then I started to do it, and I realized I want to try 3 different ones. And so when you do something like this, it's not really a work of art you can sell someone or you can hang on the wall. It becomes more of a self-reflective exercise. And so I'll talk a little bit about that experience. I had 2 inspirations for doing these scrolls. One is Chinese scroll painting. Chinese art has a long tradition of painting on long horizontal scrolls. The other inspiration I had for this was my friend Bill. Before I came to China, I lived in Portland, Oregon, and I was a member of a gallery. Another gallery member, his name was Bill, about my age. And like a lot of painters, he had lots of notebooks, sketchbooks. So whenever you saw Bill, he would have his black sketchbook and a pencil, and he would draw things around him. He would write down notes. This is fairly common for a visual artist. Bill didn't really have any other job besides painting, and he wasn't a very popular painter, and so he was fairly poor. He didn't have much money. So when he got sick, he was diagnosed with cancer. He didn't tell anybody because he didn't want to bother people or be a burden or make people feel like they'd have to help pay for him. So he got worse really quickly because he didn't have any medical care. And it was friends like myself, we didn't know he was sick until he couldn't take care of himself anymore, and he ended up in the hospital for the last few days of his life. When he went to the hospital, he brought his notebook and his pencil. That was pretty much all he brought. And he was weak at that point. He couldn't do much, but all he really did do or cared to do was sketch in his notebooks. If you go to Bill's house, he has a closet piled with notebooks over the years. So this was his last notebook. One night he died. He was by himself in the hospital bed. No one was there with him. And the nurse described to us what she saw when she went into his room. He was lying on the bed. His sketchbook was open on his stomach. He had a pencil in his hand. And the last thing he had done before he died was he picked up the pencil and he drew a picture of his foot. And his foot was sticking out at the end of the bed. So he looked down at his foot and he drew a picture of it, and then he died. So this is kind of, when we found out about this, I think a lot of us, myself included, it made me think about what's the purpose of art, what's the meaning of life, and why would that be the last thing a person does? and added to it the sad fact that he was all by himself when he did this, but he was never the type to complain. So that was my other inspiration for the 30-year scrolls. So the first scroll I started to work on was an abstract scroll. And I realized as I was doing them, like I said, I started them last year, and I'll continue on until I'm a very old man, maybe longer than 30 years, maybe shorter, I'm not sure. But for abstract art, the idea is you don't paint anything. It doesn't represent anything. So it becomes interesting over time, like what's in my head? If I draw just lines and colors, will I keep repeating myself? So it's kind of a way for me to reflect on, am I changing? And when I'm given total freedom, it's actually a hard thing to do. I'm not really an abstract painter. So it caused that type of reflection. The second scroll I'm working on is ever since I was a young man in New York City, I like to paint people on the metro. In New York, it's called the subway. And so when I come to school in the morning or I leave my work in the evening, I look at people. Sometimes I'll sketch people. As you know, if you take the metro, everyone's looking at their cell phone here in Shanghai. So they don't notice if I'm sketching them like this. Sometimes when I get off the metro, I'll sketch a picture of them. And what's interesting about this to me is in my life, I travel with all these people every day. And all these people pass by me, and my first instinct is to avoid them, move away from them, not connect with them at all. And we're not really connected, except we're all headed in the same direction. We're all passengers on the same train. And then when I go home and sketch them, and then a little bit later, this person becomes a permanent part of my life, I guess you could say. They become, when I go back and look at a sketch from 10 years ago, I probably forgot that subway ride, but still I've captured kind of a face or some element of a person. So this kind of causes me to think about my relation to others and just the human condition. The third scroll I'm working on is an autobiography, and this is an attempt to paint my life from when I was born. I was actually born in a house in southern Italy, not in a hospital, with a midwife, because there was no medical care back then, or no doctors were scarce where we were living. And so, of course, when I paint my first year of life and my second and third year, I don't really remember it. I just remember stories people tell me. And so this kind of gets to the crux of what I think can be helpful to anyone who has a creative interest that they pursue over time. And this is also the one that I think I was most inspired by my friend Bill. In college, in counseling, I should say, in therapy, there's one type of therapy called narrative therapy. So if a patient comes in and they're having the depression problems or anxiety, one way to help them is you get them to write down their story or tell their story. It's called narrative therapy. And then once a person knows their story, the goal is to get them to change their story. Maybe there's something, maybe your whole life, your mother has told you that you're really, really good at math, and then you get to this high school and your math grades are low. That might cause you anxiety. It might make you nervous. And so in narrative therapy, you would write down this story of, I was always good at math, and now I'm not, and I feel depressed. And then once you identify that, you have that self-knowledge, it's a tool to help you improve yourself, improve your mental well-being. And so in my case, I picked art as my main interest. Visual art is something I've liked, but I think for this kind of creative process to be helpful, it doesn't have to be what I do. Imagine, for example, if you every day for the next 3 years, you wrote down one sentence a day of how you feel. Probably after you have about 400 or 500 of those sentences, you might have an interesting poem. If every day you write down, I feel sad, I feel tired, I feel tired, I feel tired day after day, that's some self-knowledge. Another example of how anyone, whether you have music or writing or other kind of interest, you could For example, if you took a selfie and one picture of yourself, that's fairly common. That doesn't make you a minority. That probably puts you in the majority of people who like to take selfies. But if you did that every day for 10 years and had a picture of your face every day for 10 years, you change a lot over 10 years, but minute by minute, day by day, you probably don't notice that growing older, that change. And so that could be a way to reflect on yourself. And you might have an interesting artistic project there if you had 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 pictures of your face lined up together, and you slowly age over time. So this is the kind of thing that I would encourage all students. You don't have to be an artist or interested in art, but I think the creative process in that type of project, I think one of the keys is doing it over time, sustained, and maybe repeat something in over a long period of time. That can be a very helpful way to learn more about yourself and to enhance your own unique minority qualities. Thank you, everyone, for listening.